September 1945, the Empire of Japan surrenders. World War II is officially over. But from the ashes of war, can a lasting peace bloom against the odds? General Douglas MacArthur helps Japan turn from adversary to ally in this week's History Through the Lens. Observing another very important anniversary in American and world history, the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II, we go to the Japanese occupation and the role of one man with very strong ties to Norfolk and Hampton Roads, General Douglas MacArthur, home of the MacArthur Memorial, too, also in Norfolk. And that's why we have our guest with us, Jim Zobel, who's the archivist there at MacArthur Memorial. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
To talk about the occupation of Japan, the next chapter, if you will, after the war. And you just went to Japan for a new exhibit. We're going to talk about that in a moment. But, you know, I want to start things off with the term occupation is usually associated, not really associated with an American mission. And we did it after, Cuba and the Spanish-American War, the Panama Canal Zone. But this was different. And why MacArthur in this case?
Well, at the end of the war, the Allies issued what is known as the Potsdam Declaration, and that was basically the outline for what Japan had to do to end the war. And one of those stipulations was that Japan would be occupied and they would be demilitarized and democratized. War criminals would be held accountable. And Truman made the decision that he would choose Douglas MacArthur to take over this role. Douglas MacArthur had a vast experience throughout the world. He had been in the occupation of Germany after World War I, serving as a brigadier general there. He had been superintendent of West Point, chief of staff of the U.S. Army, ran the campaign in the Southwest Pacific that destroyed the Japanese, along with Admiral Nimitz's Central Pacific forces. And he had vast experience, and he knew a lot about people. So that's why Truman made the decision to put MacArthur to run those stipulations that the Potsdam Declaration had determined, and MacArthur was going to carry those out.
And this is one of the great military powers going from, an emperor to democracy.
Yes, it was quite a shift.
And he also trusted that Hirohito, he has to remain in power if this were to work.
He knew that he needed Hirohito to make it work for the Allies, because if Hirohito is there going along with the Supreme Commander, who's Douglas MacArthur, and when MacArthur makes these stipulations and makes these orders to the Japanese government of what they were going to do, he's got Hirohito's behind him. You have a lot of people, though, that want to put Hirohito on trial. You got a lot of people that want to execute him. And had that happened, MacArthur said that you would have guerrilla warfare within Japan for the next, couple of generations, which, might have been a overstatement, but not really, because there is that bond that was there between the Japanese and the emperor that MacArthur knew about, that he knew that this was something that if you rip that away at the point when you're making all these reformations in society, then you leave them basically in a vacuum with nothing. And so the emperor was kept in power while MacArthur initiated all these democratic reforms, as well as demilitarizing the nation.
Did MacArthur know this would work? I mean, that seems like a gamble, doesn't it?
Well, it's amazing because even before he's chosen as Supreme Commander, almost a year before, he's thinking, what am I going to do if I'm in control of occupying them afterward? And we know that because his aides would say that as early as Leyte, which is the invasion in October of 1944, a year before, that MacArthur's already thinking, what am I going to do with the emperor? What will I do with Japanese society. Now, when he is made Supreme Commander, he does follow orders that come from the Allied powers. They're telling him what to do, what needs to be done. And it's given to him as far as the impetus of when he'll do it, timing, things like that. He'll argue a great many of these things, as Douglas MacArthur does, trying to find the fine line in orders. But he does carry out all their stipulations. So it's not really him making up, policy as they go along. These are things that have been created by the Allied powers since before the war even ended.
United States, one of the few countries to have a written constitution, and yet we institute an American written constitution in Japan, an enemy we soundly defeat, one of the great military powers, aggressive military powers of the world. Wow. I mean, you just put those two things together, and how do you make that? How do you reconcile that?
It's a radical reformation in Japanese society. Of course, they look back on it now as just a short period in their history, that this was the natural evolution of things. They had a democratic movement that had happened in the 20s and the 30s that had been stifled by the militarists. So when MacArthur comes in and starts initiating these reforms, the Japanese look at it, we're just moving to where we were moving before. You've got a lot of the old guard and the people that have been running things before, but the way they look back on it now is that this was just a short blip, and then we got on the road to where we were going.
And to pull it off, I mean, there were several segments of this, and we had the Soviet Union coming up as a Cold War power, and then we solicited Japan to be our ally in that.
Yes.
And that was one of the stipulations.
Well, they do a radical shift. I mean, at first, the first 2 years is all reformation, reforming the government, reforming trade unions, reforming labor, reforming land reform. You've got all these different things that are trying to bring the Japanese people into, the government is represented by the people rather than, the emperor. And so you're making all these reforms. But then in 1947, MacArthur said, well, we've done everything that we said we were going to do. Occupations past this point is usually don't work, and said that we need to come down with a peace treaty. And people back in Washington were like, if we leave now, we leave Japan wide open to the communists. We've got to rearm them. We've got to rebuild them. And they were looking at this as far as Germany and Japan as well, make Japan the workhouse of Asia once again, just because of that Cold War element. And so they call it reverse course because it basically went against all these reforms that MacArthur had been ordered to do. And it's funny because, they blame MacArthur for making Japan this way, in this state where it's, in total weakness at that point. But that's what they had been ordering him to do.
After what happened the 20 years prior,
and then they
see that.
And then they go on this reverse course where they try to build Japan into a Cold War ally.
Great point to take a break, because you were just over in Japan, and we want to talk about your visit to this land and how you're received in that land of the rising sun after this break. Welcome back. This edition of History Through the Lens deals with the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II and the occupation of Japan, headed by General Douglas MacArthur, with great ties to Norfolk and Hampton Roads. I'm here with Jim Zobel with the MacArthur Memorial. Thank you once again for joining us. And you have spent some time in Japan recently. You went to open an exhibit there.
Yes.
How were you received by the Japanese people? And can you tell me more about what you did over there?
Oh, very well. I mean, it was organized by the city of Miyazaki. Miyazaki's in Kyushu, on the southern island there, and it's kind of almost tropical. I mean, it's the surfing capital of Japan, and the mountains come right down to the sea. It's a very pretty place. It was also one of the main invasion spots if we had invaded Japan. And so
a million troops would have been
right. And Miyazaki is the sister city of Virginia Beach, and we have an advisor at the MacArthur Memorial who's from Japan. He used to be a professor over at ODU, and I had asked him, years ago, how could we bring our collections to Japan to do some kind of exhibit. And about a year later, he brought the mayor of Miyazaki, Mayor Kiyoyama, to visit the archives, and very impressed, because we have such a vast collection of things from Japan. I think we're the only museum that really collects things about the occupation of Japan. And so when he saw this, he was like, I would like to have an exhibit in my city using all these materials. It's the first time we've ever done it. I mean, they've had small exhibits about MacArthur and the occupation, but this was using a lot of our artifacts, all of our documents, all of our photos, which we provided them to put on this exhibit, which opened in June of 2025. And so I was invited to go over and to be a part of the opening of this exhibit there.
And then it's easy to think about we once again coming over there to remind you that you lost this war, and, that we occupied you.
It wasn't so much about that. It was more about how did we get where we are today. MacArthur was so instrumental in, we talked about the Constitution and creating this American Constitution. Well, he wanted to put it through very fast before the Russians got a veto power because they had created this Far Eastern Commission. And he wanted to enshrine all those democratic reforms. So you've got all the laws of marriage, which are in the Constitution, women's rights, which are all in the Constitution, because they wanted to make sure that all of this stuck. And so when we brought this exhibit over, that's what they were trying to stress, how this Constitution was written, how it hasn't been changed in 80 years. And it's more understanding is better than remembering. And so that's what this was really about, to show the Japanese people that you had this guy that came over there that was, like I said, he was an American that had more power since ever before or since. And it was a completely benevolent occupation, that it goes on. And I think that a lot of people said we didn't know this before. And I told them, don't worry, not many people in America know about this.
That's true.
And then they had brought a lot of students through who were able to see this. And the point that was made to this, is, you've grown up with these freedoms. Are you willing to defend them? And that was the point that, a lot of the Japanese were making, and about this exhibit, that, we have all these freedoms that we have now, but, how willing are we to stand up for them?
That sounds very American.
Well, it's very Japanese thing as well. I think it's a human thing, to freedom and justice for, the people. And I think that, there's a lot of people that really understand that and want to, foment that.
So 80 years later, it was your view that from your experience, you saw that this was successfully being passed down from generation to generation to generation, that this was actually a good thing for the country.
This was kind of a shock because it really isn't. It's like I said, the Japanese look at it as a blip in their history, a short period. And it's not really stressed that much. I think they call the occupation the American basing of troops in Japan, rather than occupation.
450,000 or so, I think, after the war.
Yeah, correct, exactly. And so it was more of an eye opener than anything else. But the way that it was presented, it wasn't like, oh, you lost and we occupied your country. It was like the Japanese and the Americans kind of worked to make this thing happen. And it's like MacArthur said, we can't go over there and order them to do these reforms. The Japanese have to do it themselves. And so that was kind of the message that came out of it.
Did we set up more of a model constitution that when we look back, ours written in the late 1700s and theirs was written in 1945, did we set something up that they viewed as more progressive even than what we had in the United States?
In a sense, because of the marriage laws, the laws about women. The thing is when they created it, the Americans that were in charge of writing this, they went throughout Japan and grabbed every constitution they could find from other countries and then worked, to create this model within a week.
Wow.
This wasn't like years long.
They didn't debate
study.
this thing.
This was done in a week.
Oh, wow.
And so
what an assignment.
And then and then it goes through the Japanese government, and they felt in the sense that, we have to accept this if we want them to leave. If we want to get the Americans out of here, we've got to do this. And they all said, when the Americans are gone, we can change this. We can go back, and they haven't.
Just get them out of here. That's fascinating.
Well, I think that's what any country would be like.
Sure, of course.
Get these people out of here.
Trying to put the shoe on the other foot. I mean, how would that play in America if we had a force come in here and say, we had a bad leader?
If all your cities have been leveled, and 2 of them have been wiped out by atomic bombs, you've lost 1 million civilians, you've lost 2.5 million servicemen. I mean, the main thing about the Japanese at that point was they were just glad the bombs weren't falling anymore. And so, I mean, if you're talking about the occupation of America, then we've been totally destroyed, and I don't look forward to that at all.
No, because and then again, we keep hearing the number of it would take 1 million American lives to do an invasion prior to dropping.
That's what they were. That's what they were thinking. Yeah,
and just what is interesting is we go from a culture where these people would have fought tooth and nail to the death. We had the kamikaze pilots and all those strong traditions. We went from that to let's remake our society under another country's occupation.
It's an amazing, John Dower wrote a book about the occupation. He called it Embracing Defeat. And that was kind of like the mindset of the Japanese at that point.
It's really incredible.
Embracing defeat.
We're going to come back, take a quick break. This is going so well and so quickly. We can talk about this forever. Jim Zobel's my guest on this edition of History Through the Lens. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back. This is History Through the Lens. I'm Tom Schaad with Jim Zobel from the MacArthur Memorial, and we're talking about the American occupation of Japan post-World War II and the kind of the remaking of a nation. And we have to get to the meat here because there is a new exhibit not only opening up in Japan, but here in Norfolk at the MacArthur Memorial called No Turning Back.
Correct.
And what will people see when they go to the memorial with No Turning Back?
This is the full story of the occupation of Japan. It's like I was saying, there's no other museum in the United States that collects materials about the occupation of Japan. I think we are the premier institution that does that. And so you'll come in and you'll see everything that goes through about the arrival in Japan, about the surrender of Japan, about the rounding up of war criminals, about the devastation that Japan faced at that time, things we've been talking about, the recreation of the Constitution, as well as that reverse course that I was talking about, and then how the Korean War, because when they do the reverse course, they bring in Joseph Dodge, who redoes their banking system and gets them on a balanced budget. And then the Korean War comes along, and that's
balanced budget. What was that?
Yeah, exactly.
Balanced budget.
But they did, and
I'm being facetious.
And then when the Korean War starts, then Japan becomes like the workhouse of the Allies, and then that's what creates the new growth in Japan that will last throughout the 1960s. So it was a progression that put Japan in a position that they were able to grow from.
And we know what happened in the 1970s and 80s.
Sure.
They sent terror through us economically.
Yes, they did.
Because there were a lot of people who were saying at that point, gee, if we only, look what we did. We rebuilt that country and they came back and now they're kicking our behinds. Of course, that's a little hyperbole. And now we know that, we're doing just fine.
Yeah.
As far as the world economic stage, but could this happen again today? I mean, could we do what we did at the end of World War II and basically rebuild a country like Japan? It looks like we've had some unsuccessful attempts.
Yeah,
in recent decades.
You go into Iraq and Afghanistan, and you're dealing with kind of almost not the same mindset of being rooted in the past, but in the sense of when you went in there, a lot of people were talking about, this will be occupation, and we'll need to replicate what we did in Japan. And there was many authors, historians in Japan that said basically, who are you going to get to play Douglas MacArthur? Because you didn't really have someone that came in and understood the culture, of what was going on in Iraq at that time. And there was a lot of big mistakes that were made. And it's also, like we were saying before, when we go into Japan, they're just glad the bombs aren't falling anymore.
Right.
And that really didn't happen, with Iraq and Afghanistan, where it was just, we went in and bombed everybody to the point where they just couldn't even breathe anymore. And so, I mean, it's two different animals.
That's a really good point you raise about how badly, Tokyo and of course the 2 atomic bombs and just
66 cities were erased by the fire bombs.
Wow.
And I mean, they were starving. When MacArthur first gets there, finds out that they have no food. The crop for 45 is gone. They have to immediately bring in food to be able to rescue these people. And that's why the Japanese looked as the Americans as not coming there to, thrust the bayonet in further, because MacArthur rounded up all those food supplies that were supposed to be used in the invasion, gave them to the Japanese, and they were feeding the Japanese cities, most all of them, through 1947. The Americans were.
2 years.
And so they say they saved between 3 to 5 million Japanese from starvation. And that is what I call a benevolent occupation. It's something that's not really known, about when MacArthur goes in there. The orders from the government, from the Allies, were that the Japanese were on their own. They had to take care of themselves. And MacArthur said, no, if we don't feed these people, you need to send me 1 million more troops right now, because he knew that you were just going to have widespread riots.
Could someone else besides MacArthur, given the stage we had in 1945, could anybody else have done what he did?
Well, I don't know. Some people have said, you'd put Chester Nimitz in there, who was the naval commander. Chester Nimitz was a very level-headed person. The thing is that MacArthur has this, I don't know if it's an ability to influence other people, but the Russians were trying to take Hokkaido, which is the Japanese northernmost island. And it was MacArthur that basically said, 1 foot, he said it to the head of the Russian delegation, if one Soviet soldier lands in Hokkaido, I'm locking you in a dungeon and nobody's ever going to find you. And the Soviet guy was like, I believe you would do that. MacArthur was basically like, try me. And he knew that if the Russians tried to do anything, MacArthur was going to throw the full force at them. And the Russians still want Hokkaido. I mean, they're right across the Tsushima Straits there, and they are looking to have that. Putin is very imperialistic now. It's something that they do still worry about. But the thing is, if you had somebody else and the Russians had taken Hokkaido, Japan would not exist as it was, because they wouldn't have given it back.
Wow. I mean, they seem to respect, or at least the Soviets did at that point, respect what MacArthur was saying, because they believed he would back it up.
I think so, and I think Stalin just said, "Well, I can push and push, but I don't want to get into a fight over this thing, because I've got sitting over here with Eastern Europe, which I'm trying to take over, and so I mean."
What is the legacy of this that we should all take away? The lesson that when you go to MacArthur Memorial and you see this exhibit, what is the lesson for all Americans on the occupation of Japan?
Well, MacArthur would always say that people in the world, they just want a roof over their head and they want some food, and there's other people that just, we want power, we want control. And so, I mean, if you look at it in the sense of MacArthur going in there, it is a benevolent thing, even though with all the racial hatreds really that have been brought about during the war, of the Japanese versus the Americans. Sure. And the thing is once they land, everybody realizes all these stories that have been told were not true at all. People were people. And, a lot of those guys that were veterans of the Pacific War, they got to Japan and they were just like, yeah, these people are just people like us, So I think it's, if you look at could we do this, or, could it happen again? Sure. But you've got to have people that have a mindset that are looking to better the lives of people rather than vengeance.
And difficult to gain that trust in today's world.
Sure.
Very, very a more complex world. We are much smaller today than we were in 1945. Great place to leave off. I think the exhibit is No Turning Back at MacArthur Memorial, and go check it out in downtown Norfolk. This is History Through the Lens. Thank you for joining us. I'm Tom Schaad. And remember, we make history every day.